This channel is all about encouraging, uplifting and empowering family to have been affected by baby loss. Today's video is a difficult one for me to record. It's all about my second trimester miscarriage. It was the most traumatic, it was the hardest physically to deal with, and I have left it to the last minute to record it because I really don't want to dredge up all those feelings again. But this is therapy for me, and I also want to be able to help and uplift and encourage families who have also experienced baby loss. So I'm going to tell you my story in the hopes that you will feel that you are not alone, that there is someone out there who understands what you're going through, and that you will be okay. There are going to be days when it's hard to talk about this subject, when it's hard to remember what you've lost, but you'll be okay. And sometimes it's okay to not be okay. Let me share my story with you. In total, it took another year for us to get pregnant again. It took 3 months at least for my period to start again. And then we did another sort of 6 months of actively trying to conceive. And in that time, it was not happening, and it was really taking an effect on our relationship. So we decided to stop trying and to just enjoy life and enjoy each other and get things back on track that way. If we were going to get pregnant again, we would get pregnant again, and we'll just leave that up to God. But let's not put this pressure on ourselves of we need to do this on this day at this time, which is what can happen when you're actively trying. So after our second trimester miscarriage, we had discussed as a couple what we would do going forward, and if there was anything that we could do to find out why I had had a miscarriage in the second trimester. We both went to see our GPs and got some tests done to make sure we didn't have any fertility issues, and those all came back with normal results. You can't be referred to a specialist until you've had 3 miscarriages, and I was only on my second, so that wasn't something he was prepared to offer. But he did say that based on my partner's results and my results, there was no reason why we couldn't conceive again. When you're actively trying to get pregnant, you have to do things on a schedule at a certain time in the month in order to achieve a result. This can really take away from the fun and the romance that you have with your partner. So I encourage you to stop trying. Because after some time, if you've been trying for a long time, your relationship does start to suffer a little bit, and ours definitely took a hit in that department. So we just decided that we weren't going to do that anymore, and we fell pregnant. I remember being at my granddad's house with my mum and my other half, and just being like, it is too hot in here. Are the heaters on? I'm melting. What is going on? My period must be due because I am hot from head to toe. And my mum and other half are looking at me like, what's wrong with this girl? It is not hot. It's definitely you. And I was like, well, it might be me, but it's only me because I'm coming on my period and I'm getting a hot flush. So that's what's going on. And my other half is just like looking at me as if I'm crazy, which technically is always how he looks at me, but he just thought I was crazy because he for some time had been saying that I was probably pregnant, but I didn't think I was pregnant. I was no longer tracking my ovulation. I was no longer tracking when my period was supposed to be. So I didn't actually know that my period was due. And it was only just a spur of the moment thing that I thought, let me just check one of these apps. They were generally really good at telling me when my period was going to be. They weren't that great at predicting ovulation. That's a video for another time where I will talk about that. They always tend to be good when it comes to predicting when my period is going to be, give or take a day or two. So I thought to myself one morning, let's just quickly check this app, because you know, I haven't had my period for a little while and I never want my period ever. My periods are not nice. So I'm never wishing a period, but I knew that one was due and it hadn't come. So I checked the app and lo and behold, one of them said, you know, your period was a week late. The other one said it was 4 days late. And I was just like, there's no way. My period is never off by that much. So I had one of those cheapo pregnancy tests in my bathroom and I thought, let me go and quickly check, because you know it's going to be negative. It's not my first pee of the day. It's probably a minute, if that, before I could see 2 lines appearing. And I just thought, nah, this must be an old test. Let me look at this test. Where's the packet? You know, this test must be out of date. There is just no way. But no, it wasn't. There were 2 very strong pink lines on this pregnancy test. So I panicked and I got my clear blue digital accurate pregnancy test and used the same pee and tried to see if it was just a fluke, because I was not convinced by this stage. And it wasn't. It came back pregnant 1 to 2. And I almost screamed because I could not believe what I was seeing at this point. We had been trying for a good year, I'm sure, by this time. And we really, in the last few months, had decided that we weren't going to, you know, trying to conceive like all our attention as we had been doing for so long. I knew my other half would be completely shocked as well. So I wanted to do something special to surprise him. But obviously I had no time to plan and I couldn't keep it to myself. I had to let him know. I was over the moon and I wanted him to know. I was trying to think of some fun way to let him know, but I couldn't think of anything because I was just too excited and I just wanted him to know as soon as possible. And the only thing I could think of was to stick it in the cutlery drawer. Stick it in the cutlery drawer. He's emptying the dishwasher. He will come across it and he won't be expecting it, and we can just be excited and overjoyed together because I'm bursting. And if I could have just blurted it out, I would have. But I thought, let me do something fun. As he was putting the cutlery away, he found it and he was like, what's this? And I was like, huh? What? He's like, what's this doing in it? You know, he's seen enough of these tests. We've done enough of these tests for him to know what it was. So I'm just like keeping storm, waiting for him to turn it over and see pregnant 1 to 2. And as he turns it over, I could just hear him like, no way, no way, no way. I'm like, yeah, really, yeah. Just literally how I was. Until we realised that, look, we need to put precautions in place. We need to make sure we have this baby, carry it to term, healthy and everything. We can't go through what we went through before because it was just so devastating. So around the 9-10 week mark, I went in for a scan at the early pregnancy unit and I could hear the heartbeat and everything looked normal and healthy and fine, and I was really, really happy. I saw the consultant the same week and they gave me some information about my options available. And in those options she said that I could do nothing, that she believed that I'd had an infection and that was the reason for my last miscarriage, and that because I no longer had that infection, that there was little chance I would have any complications with this pregnancy. But if I wanted to take some precautions, she offered me the surgical stitch at 14 weeks. The alternative was to take progesterone I cannot say that word. Basically, it's the little tablets that you have to insert. I'm going to put the word suppositories. I think it's suppositories. Let's go with suppositories. As well as coming in for fortnightly scans to ensure that everything is progressing normally. So that is what I was aiming for. I knew that my partner wanted us to do something, and I felt like this was the least invasive. I was planning to come back for my 12-week scan, and the consultant told me that she would have my prescription ready for that scan, and if everything was okay, then I could go and get the progesterone and start taking that, as well as continue to take the aspirin as well. But she said, let's see what happens at the 12-week scan. That's the first hurdle or milestone to reach. Sonographer wasn't able to get the angles that she needed to test for Down syndrome, so I was going to have to come back at 14 weeks to have some blood work done to test for that. So that was a bit disappointing, but everything else looked normal. She was happy, I was happy, and I finally felt like I could tell people I'm pregnant. Hooray, exciting, pregnant. When you've experienced a loss at any stage, it's never as enjoyable an experience being pregnant as it is for those who have no idea of the risks that are involved with pregnancy and what can happen. So you are happy, you are excited, but you know better than to share your joy, just because it's really difficult when you have to tell people that it didn't work out. I was given the prescription for progesterone, but the hospital did not have any progesterone. So I was going to have to wait a little while for those to come in before I could start taking them. But everything was normal at this point. It was 14 weeks and I felt comfortable enough to start telling a few family members and friends that I was indeed pregnant. So round about 16 weeks, I returned to work and was going about my daily job activities and had no problems. I felt okay, happy, I felt good, because I was only doing half of what I would usually be doing. I wasn't as tired and I was fine. I remember around 17 weeks, me and my other half were both getting ready to leave at the same time, and I felt the gush and I knew instantly what was happening. I just dropped to my knees because I just knew. I held my stomach and just cried out, not again. I cannot go through this again. And my other half was standing next to me and just peeled me up off of the floor and said, listen, let's just go to A&E. It's going to be okay. You're going to be okay. And put me in the car and drove me to A&E. They confirmed again that I was miscarrying. My waters had gone. I needed to have a scan to confirm how much waters were left, but because I've been down this road before, I already knew that it was a pretty hopeless situation at this point. My waters were just so much that I knew that there would not be much left, and I knew that that subsequently would be a problem in terms of the treatment that I could have. So after having a scan, it was confirmed that all of the water had gone and that I would need to terminate this pregnancy again. We were devastated, we were heartbroken, we were crushed. I was told again that because I had not reached the 24-week mark, that there would be no saving my baby, but there was a strong possibility that this baby would be born alive, but they would not be making any efforts to save the baby, even if it was born alive, because that baby was under 24 weeks. He explained that I would need to monitor myself. We were in a pandemic. I couldn't come in every day and have my blood pressure checked and blood drawn. I would need to monitor my temperature, and if there were any changes, bleeding, pain, I needed to come back. I'd made it to 18 weeks and I remember just having cramps the whole day, and it probably got into the late evening and I realised that I was contracting, I was going into labour. So in between contractions, I packed a little bag and said that I would drive myself to A&E. It was only about half an hour away. I live in the country, so it's mostly quiet country roads, and I knew that I could get there in 25 minutes if necessary. So when I got a break in contractions, I made my way to the car with my bag and my dressing gown. I literally came out in my pyjamas and jumped in the car and drove to A&E. I thank God for cruise control because I was having contractions all the way to the hospital. I made it to the reception and the receptionist, you know, was doing his job. He was asking me all these questions and I was having contractions and I couldn't talk. And I guess he thought I was inebriated or whatever and just told me to like go and take a seat, take a seat. And I finally got a break in my contractions and went back to speak to him and said, look, I'm in labour. I need to have a COVID test so I can be admitted onto the maternity ward. But by the time I'd got all of that out and given him all my personal information, I was having another contraction and I just screamed my head off because I was in so much pain at this point that a nurse came rushing out with a wheelchair and they just took me back to see a doctor. They stick a cotton bud up your nose and, you know, try and get your blood pressure and attach all these, you know, machines to you to get all the readings that they need. They're trying to undress you at the same time. There was a lot going on. So I guess the doctor called the maternity ward, gave them my details, and he asked, you know, what treatment should he give me? What was the plan? And I guess I found out later that the maternity ward had explained that I would not be going to the maternity ward. I could be given any kind of medication. This baby would not be viable, so therefore it didn't matter what medication that I was given for the pain. I just needed to deliver the baby and it be taken away for tests. So once the doctor knew that he could give me any medication, I was given Penthrox. I'll insert a picture of it. It's this inhaler that's meant to be the same as gas and air on a maternity ward. And whenever you're feeling pain, you just inhale and it gives you some pain relief. I was given a private room, as a private room could be in a treatment ward in A&E. And a nurse was placed in the room with me to watch me go into labour, to ensure that everything was happening normally and safely. I was probably in that room for another, I want to say 10 to 15 minutes before I was able to deliver the baby. The nurse was confident that because I had been through this before, that she could leave me to get on with it. So she left me to get on with it for the most part. A different gynecologist came in and she had with her, I could call it like a linen baby sleeping bag. And she took the baby off me and put it in this sleeping bag and said that she would ensure that it goes to the right place, to have some tests done to find out, hopefully, the reason for this miscarriage, if there was one to be found. So I trusted them to do what they needed to do, and she asked me again if I thought I'd passed the placenta, and I said, you know, I really don't know. Be one of those clots with a placenta, I don't know. I wasn't focused on that, but she said she was going to discharge me now. I was free to go, and that was it. So they asked me how I was getting home, and I told them I drove myself and I'd be driving myself home. So that's what I did. I drove myself home, and on the way I let my other half know that I had delivered the baby. I would be making my way home now, and I'd explain everything then. I'd taken some pictures for him because I knew he wanted to see, and I just made my way home. When I got home and explained to my other half what I went through, he was angry at the fact that they treated me like that and I hadn't gone to the maternity ward. But by this time I was just trying to process what I was going through. I didn't really want to give it much thought, and I showed him the pictures, and I may or may not include pictures at some point. They might be uploaded to my Instagram, so you can follow me on Instagram if you actually want to see the pictures. I'm not sure if I'm going to actually insert them in this video, but there are pictures, and I was 18 weeks, so it's quite a decent sized baby, and you could see everything. And he actually was the spitting image of my other half, but just had my nose. So it was a very difficult time for both of us, because when you lose a baby, you lose all your hopes and dreams that you had for that baby, and I can't really explain it to you, but even when you're pregnant, you literally can't help but fantasize about what your baby's going to look like and what personality they're going to have, who they're going to look like more. It's just, I think it's a completely natural thing. So when that's snatched away from you overnight or in minutes or in hours, it's a loss that only people who have been through it can really understand. When someone loses a baby, all you can do is be there for them. Physically, emotionally, spiritually, just be there for them. Just be there. There is nothing that you can say. And I'm doing another video about how to speak to someone after baby loss or after grief, who's grieving. Just be there. Just be there and show your support and your love for that person and what they're going through. I hope that you never have to understand what it actually feels like, but it is a loss, and just like losing anyone or anything, it hurts a lot, and there's nothing that anyone can say to make you feel better, but just knowing that people are there to support you is all that you really want and need at that time. The following day, I did not feel right. I had been down this road before, and I knew what I was supposed to feel like. I knew what was supposed to happen, and it was not happening. So I called up the early pregnancy unit and said, listen, I really need to have a scan. The following day, a midwife called me back, and she said, listen, Jamie, we don't really do scans. Everything came out, and that's it. You know, until around the 4 to 8 week mark, when we call you back in just to make sure you're okay and everything is okay. And I said, no, something is wrong. I should be bleeding. And if there isn't any bleeding, that usually means that my body still thinks that I'm pregnant. So the doctor called me back, and I think maybe it was 3 or 4 days after everything had happened. And I said to him that I needed to have a scan, that I didn't have any bleeding, and he was like, okay, fine, we'll give you a scan, come in today, have a scan. And at this scan, he confirmed what I already knew. The majority of the placenta was still inside me, remaining intact, and I would need to have a procedure to remove it. And that procedure would either be a D&C, which I'd had in my miscarriage. So if you've watched that story, I will link it in the cards somewhere, to have these tablets inserted high into you so that you can pass the remaining tissue like a really heavy, painful period. I didn't want to have a D&C for the same reason. I never want surgery. I just don't like it. And I would have to come back the following day to have these tablets inserted and to go through this procedure of of evacuating the remaining tissue of the pregnancy. I had a female consultant this time, and she explained to me that she was going to insert these tablets very high inside me, and within probably an hour or two I would start bleeding, very heavy, very painful, like a really bad period, and evacuate the rest of the placenta, and that would be the end of it. So she inserted those pills so far inside me that I felt so violated, so very violated that day. They tried to put a tampon in there just to make sure that everything stays up there, but I didn't want a tampon. So I made my way home, and I think I maybe made it 10-15 minutes up the road before the bleeding started, the massacre. There was just blood everywhere, and I had at least 10 minutes before I would be home. So that was horrible. Got home and bled for about an hour, give or take, and then it just stopped completely. So the following day, this is probably now what, day 5 or 6 days after this happened, and I speak to someone in the early pregnancy unit again and say, look, everything's stopped again, nothing is happening, what is going on, can I see the same consultant? Receptionist is like, no, she was only here for the day, she's gone now, you're gonna have to see someone else, come back in for a scan. Came back in for a scan, saw a different consultant this time, and he said that he could see some tissue still remaining, and that the only option at this point was to have a D&C to make sure everything was out. They would use a scanning machine to make sure that they got everything out, so that I didn't have to go through this again. So he booked me in for the following week, because it's like Friday by this time. Booked me in for the Monday or the Tuesday to have the D&C. Being in bed one night, and this is like 2-3 o'clock in the morning, and just being in so much pain, so much bleeding, and just being like, listen, something is not right. And I remember just going into the bathroom and just bleeding, and it would not stop. It was uncontrollable. My other half was freaking out. He was like, Jamie, you need to go to A&E, you need to go to A&E now, let's go. And me being me, I didn't want to go to A&E. I was just like, the bleeding will stop, like it's been stopping in the last 2 times that bleeding was meant to last for a long time. It will stop, I'll be fine, and if it doesn't stop, I'll drive myself to A&E, it's fine, I'll go to A&E. I guess my body had other ideas, and at some point I collapsed on the floor and was in and out of consciousness, and my partner had to call 999. I was hemorrhaging. I had lost 2 litres of blood, and when the ambulance arrived, I was passed out on the floor. I remember making my way to hospital, and a nurse just holding my hand and saying, listen, everything's going to be alright, we're going to put you to sleep now, you're going to have the D&C, you're going to be okay. Let me know in the comments below what you think about my hospital's policy about waiting 4 to 8 weeks after a miscarriage to check up on women. I needed 4 blood transfusions. I obviously was anemic. I, at the time, did not eat meat, and they were really struggling to get my iron levels back up. So I ended up having, I think in the end, 4 blood transfusions to feel like a normal person, as well as being on iron tablets for around 3 to 4 months before my iron levels returned to normal. I wasn't speaking to anybody at this time. I didn't really tell people what was going on. I had shut myself off from everyone. I had too much stuff going on. This all kind of happened in the space of like 2 weeks. So I didn't have time to tell people every step of the way what was happening, because it was just too much and I was just too weak and too ill. I spent a few weeks in hospital. I just needed time to heal and recover, and I took that time. Me and my other half took that time. That was just all I could do, was just get things to make sense in my brain and to deal with things in my brain before I could share it with other people. So even after spending time in hospital, having an emergency D&C, there still remained a pea-sized amount of tissue still left. And because I had exhausted all the medication that was on offer and all the surgical options, they told me that I would have to wait to see if I passed this remaining tissue naturally, and I would need to keep having scans with every cycle to see if it had passed. And probably around 4 weeks later, I found out for a scan that I had passed everything, and my womb was now empty. So that was my second trimester miscarriage story. Loss is hard at any stage, and second trimester miscarriage, especially my second trimester miscarriage, was not any easier. Even though I knew what to expect, I knew what was going to happen, it still hit me like a ton of bricks. It still floored me and my other half when we got that devastating news. And I just want women to know, and families to know, because it does affect the men as well, that you need to talk to somebody. I'm talking to you because this is my version of therapy, but it's important to talk to someone. Talk to each other, talk to a family member, talk to yourself. Keep a journal, keep a video journal if that's what is your thing. But you need to get it out, you need to express it. You need to join groups with people that are going through the same sort of thing. You are not alone. And that is why I share my story with you, in the hope that you will feel some comfort of knowing that you will be okay. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but with time you will be okay. So if you or anyone you know has been affected by baby loss, leave me an orange heart in the comments below. Follow the series. I post videos every Sunday and Wednesday at 8 p.m. If you've made it this far, why not subscribe for videos like this? Like and share it with anyone you know who may be experiencing baby loss.